Savikalpa means with objects. It means we're talking about the arising phenomena. And as they arise, they're just seen as one with what we are, which is presence. No duality. There's a problem with the Savikalpa teachings, the teachings that remain on the objective level. Maybe some of you who have been investigating, following non-duality for a while, or the non-dual teachings for a while, maybe you've seen this. Maybe you've recognized it, maybe you haven't. There are problems with the Savikalpa teachings. The basic problem is that fundamentally, for most people, they don't work. They feel nice. Intuitively, it feels right, maybe. But the ego and the suffering keep on coming back. The Savikalpa teachings say, all of this is one. It's just presence, just what you are. There's no separation. And most of the non-dual teachings, the radical non-dual teachings, the so-called Neo-Advaita, and the traditional non-dual teachings, the traditional Advaita Vedanta, most of these teachings are the Savikalpa teachings. They show you they point out your nature as presence, as the absolute, as consciousness, whatever word they choose to use. And they point out your fundamental identity is not that of the body-mind. And that the entire field or sphere of your perception is one movement. The radical non-dual teachings, or the so-called Neo-Advaita teachings, they don't even distinguish between the relative and the absolute. They just say, this is all there is, or something like that. This is what's happening. It's just oneness arising, seeming to be many, but just actually not many. Just oneness arising, wholeness. And that's all there is. It's this wholeness. And many of us will grasp these teachings. The other thing about the Savikalpa teachings is that they are, for most, I think anyway, do tell me if I'm wrong, they are fairly easy to grasp. They make sense on the level of the mind, maybe. Might be some sticking points if you're very, or if you probe a bit deeper. If you have a philosophical type mind or an intellectual type mind, you might find a few holes, a few flaws in the reasoning. But on the most part, whether you believe them or not, or you see them as being true or not, it's fairly easy to understand. But for most people, the Savikalpa teachings alone are not enough. The habitual tendency to identify as the body-mind keeps on reaffirming itself with vigor, with energy, with strength. It's hard to let go of. Maybe when you're in satsang and you're feeling at peace, when you're listening to a teacher or something, or if things are going well in your life and you're in a calm place, it all makes sense, it all fits together. Intuitively, you know, this is all one. But when you're away from that nice, cozy, comfy place, when adversity comes along, when a challenge comes your way, when you're away from the teacher, teaching, the thinking and the egotism come back. The doubts come back. The identification, the contraction, the suffering comes back. And it keeps on coming back. Notice the Savikalpa teachings don't require that much meditation. You need to be a bit calm. You need to be able to observe, follow what the teacher or the teaching is saying, and then you can see it to some degree in your own experience right here, right now. It doesn't require a huge amount of meditation. It doesn't require you to turn inwards. It doesn't necessarily require you to give up anything. So here we come to the liberating teachings, the teachings that take that Savikalpa style teaching and take it one step further to the Nirvikalpa teachings. The teachings that naturally follow from the Savikalpa teachings. It's a natural progression. If you allow yourself to let go of the mind, let go of what the mind wants and follow your intuition, you'll naturally come to the Nirvikalpa teachings. These are the teachings that the mind does not want to get into. Usually. The mind is happy to entertain the Savikalpa teachings. The teachings that do not deny objective reality, do not require much meditation, and do not require much renunciation, letting go, giving up. I wonder why the ego is happy to indulge in the Savikalpa teachings. It doesn't require much, does it? Plus, if what I say is correct, if my claim is correct that they're not that effective, or they're not ultimately liberating, that's good for the ego. The ego doesn't have to go. The ego can stick around and pretend that it doesn't need to go. The liberating teachings remove the ego. They remove egotism and they remove suffering. For most people, or we can say for most apparent people, for most people, most apparent people, there are no real people. For most apparent people, we need the Nirvikalpa teachings. These teachings advise us to turn away from objective phenomena, to turn inwards, to abide as what we truly are in our hearts, in our innermost core, and discover what our true nature is, not with the mind, but with our true self. These teachings make less sense. But you will naturally end up following these teachings at some point. It's just a matter of time, because you'll soon realize that the Savikalpa teachings, in which you do not turn away from objects, don't ultimately work. Even though there's a great truth in them. This is why I'm so thankful. One of the many reasons I'm so thankful to Guru Ramana, who taught us this teaching, who teaches us this teaching now. To this day, he is teaching us this. He's in our hearts with a fishing rod, reeling us into him. Oh yes, he is. He was a vegetarian, so he didn't fish for fish. But he happily fishes on and catches his devotees and reels them in, devouring their ego. This is his love for us. This is why all the true teachings, and we know this in our hearts if we are open, this is why all the true teachings recommend deep introspective meditation. Deep introspection. Not, when I say introspection, I'm not talking about psychoanalysis, psychological introspection, no. I'm talking about when your awareness goes deep within itself and abides as pure being, devoid of objects. We know this in our hearts. We know all this. I'm sharing with you what you already somewhere know. If you let go of your thinking mind, which maybe your thinking mind thinks it knows what the teachings are. If you're able to let go of that, and if you let go of everything I say too, by the way, all the concepts I'm feeding you, and all the concepts your mind is feeding you, and you look in your heart, you feel your heart, you feel within your heart, you will feel the teachings for yourself. I'm just putting in words what is already within you. The less attached to your mind and your concepts and your dogmas, the less attached to your mind you are, the more readily and easily you will see the truth of these teachings. The more attached you are to your view of reality, your concepts, or my concepts, or Ramana's concepts, the more attached you are to any of these concepts, the less able you will be to accept the true teaching within your heart, which is what I'm just expressing verbally. It's the universal teaching. Universal teaching. Timeless teaching. That there is no single author There's no one responsible. It's just the self, pure being. So, I have given you the teaching today about Savikalpa and Nirvikalpa. Contemplate upon these teachings. Listen to what I've said. Say to yourself, okay, maybe what Tom is saying is right. Let me see, is he right? Look in your life. Look at your experience. Contemplate upon what I've said to you. You've heard what I've said, Shravana. Now, reflect upon it. Think about it. Manana, the second step of the teaching. First step is Shravana, listening to the teachings. Second step is saying, okay, I trust Tom on some level. But he's saying, don't just fully trust. Have a look. Have a think. Have I come across the Savikalpa teachings that don't require any renunciation, turning within? And have they worked for me? Do I like to try the Nirvikalpa teachings? Maybe there's resistance. If there's resistance, that's the ego. The ego is the identification with the body-mind. It does not want to end. This is the ignorance. This is the suffering. It wants to feel good, but it doesn't want to end. What's the problem? What's the problem with that? What's the problem if the ego wants to feel good, but it doesn't want to end? The problem with this is that the ego is looking for a pleasant sensation. There's nothing wrong with that. Totally innocent, totally understandable. But what's the problem? The problem is it doesn't last. No object, no sensation, subtle object. These things don't last. They always end in suffering. There's only one solution. Not to lean on objects, not to lean towards objects, which includes teachings and concepts, which are subtle objects, but to lean only on that which is not an object and that which does not change. The pure being, which is our essence, which is our core, our essence, or as Ramana says, our heart. Remember, the word heart, when Ramana uses it, means our essence. The heart of something is its essence, its core, its center, the most essential aspect of it. So the Savikalpa teachings are very useful. They're very nice. There's great truth there. In our daily life, we can let go of our sense of self and see our presence in everywhere, everything. This is a beautiful practice, a beautiful way of seeing the world. This is a beautiful way of bringing spirituality into our daily life. Bringing the spirit. Everything is the spirit. Everything is what we are. Presence, spirit, same thing. And all there is this one present spirit consciousness. His nature is wholeness, peace, love, happiness. In everything you look, anywhere you look, that's all you see. There is no real seeing, there's just presence being, and all these things appearing within presence, non-separate from it. And then Guru Ramana reminds us, yes, 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 yes. You must go beyond this. You must remove nama rupa, remove name form, which means all objects, abide as the self. I think there's that, I did a post on that, remove nama rupa. If you do a search for Tom Das, nama rupa Ramana, you'll probably find it. Ramana tells us, somebody comes up to him and says, isn't non-duality just seeing this oneness everywhere? Or something like, he says something like that. This Savikalpa style teaching. And Ramana says, yes, yes, but we have to go beyond this. This is why self-inquiry is the only way. This is why self-inquiry is needed. This is why meditation or abiding as the self, Nididhyasana, the third aspect of the teaching, is so important. We hear the teaching, Shravana, for step 1. We think about the teaching, we reflect upon the teaching, step 2, Manana. Once we've thought about the teaching and heard the teaching and thought about the teaching and heard the teaching and thought about the teaching and heard the teaching, repeated Shravana Manana, we slowly, because not because we're stupid, not because we're dense, but because ignorance is strong, apparently. Not really. Just seems that way. When you're attending to it, when you're placing your attention on Maya, ignorance seems very strong. Through repeated Shravana Manana, we slowly start to realize, oh, there's no happiness in all these things. There's no happiness from my attention going out to all these objects. The only way is for my attention to go towards that formless presence that I am, the subject. To actually take my attention. Slowly, we've repeated Shravana Manana. This is why it's good to come to satsang. Shravana. This is why it's good to read the texts that I've recommended. Ramana's teachings. It's more Shravana. And think about it, Manana. And like a big ship sailing through the ocean, slowly it changes direction. A tanker, the big tanker ships, they don't just change direction straight away. Slowly, they turn, degree by degree they turn, and then eventually you're sailing home. And you're facing selfward. Repeated Shravana Manana is the key. And then you'll start to do Nididhyasana, third step, which is to take your attention and let it fall into yourself. Let go of all the phenomena and your attention naturally collapses in onto itself. You abide as pure being. And it's like a process of distillation or purification or separation, ironically, in which all the ignorance is driven away. It's all driven off. All the impurities are burnt away, boiled off. And when this becomes steady, when this Nididhyasana or meditation, step 3, becomes steady, it's known as Samadhi, which is just a natural progression of Nididhyasana. So we can see. You hear the teaching. Naturally, you'll start to think about the teaching. And after hearing and thinking and hearing and thinking, eventually we will start to turn within. Slowly at first, intermittently at first. And we've naturally gone to Nididhyasana, meditation, turning within, abiding as the soul. As that, and then we do Shravana Manana, Nididhyasana. Shravana Manana, Nididhyasana. They all work together. They all encourage. The point of Shravana Manana is to encourage meditation, Nididhyasana. And as that grows stronger, we go into Samadhi. It becomes more and more a part of our life. When now we are becoming ripe, truly ripe for liberation. Now we can let go of Shravana Manana. Shravana Manana becomes less important when your focus every day is Nididhyasana Samadhi. You'll naturally start to let go of reading and hearing the verbal teachings. It'll be more about the presence. And then this is what leads to liberation. From duality. Duality is the belief you are the body-mind living in a world. It's not real. It's belief. From duality to Savikalpa, non-duality, to Nirvikalpa, to liberation. Shankara describes this progression in the text of Vivekachudamani. He describes this progression. Ramana, in his summary, when Ramana translated the entire text of Vivekachudamani into Tamil, and in his introduction to the text, he summarized the entire teaching in a few pages, and this is what Ramana explains as well in his summary of Vivekachudamani. Vivekachudamani was written about, I don't know how many years ago, 1400 years ago, something like that. 1.5 millennia ago, something like that. One of the most important traditional non-dual texts. So, is this teaching helpful to you? Is this teaching what you already know? Did you know it intellectually already? Is there something about what I said that brought new light to it? Is this something you already feel inside you somewhere? That yes, I must turn within, really? Or maybe you don't like what I'm saying. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you're fighting against it. Or maybe I'm just wrong. It's all good. It's all good. I don't mind. These traditional teachings have worked for centuries. They've been handed down for centuries, for millennia. They haven't changed because they work. So I'm sharing that same teaching that was shared with me, sharing that with you. And obviously, it's up to you what you do with that. But I hope that sharing it verbally can give you a nice conceptual framework within which you can find your way home to yourself. So the suffering ends, the dream of separation ends, truly ends, not just pretend, not just pretend ending, not just on the conceptual level, not just superficial, but deep, deep in the depths of your being, there is a profound realization that is genuine, as opposed to something that is merely conceptual and shallow. So it's good to embrace the Savikalpa, means oneness everywhere. And then drop into Nirvikalpa. Without dropping into Nirvikalpa, the Savikalpa alone will be shallow. It will not be deep rooted. The ego will still be there, basically. It'll still be in full control. The thief will be pretending to be the policeman, telling you, I've caught the thief. And you'll be very happy. You'll go off and celebrate with the policeman that you caught the thief. You'll be putting your arms around the policeman, cheering, and you're embracing the thief, the ego, the whole time. Unless you turn within. The texts are recommended on tomdas.com. These are some of the most powerful texts that I have found, most powerful books that I have found that really clearly point this path out.